G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. So this is going to be my Battlegrounds preview video for the upcoming week 3 meta of Archaeos and Rich Get Richer. So we've just had a really cool last 2 weeks with Cosmic Shatter, so we've been using champions like, obviously the main Cosmics like Cosmic Ghost Rider, Hercules, Hulkling, but even some other ones like Null. I've seen some stuff from even weird ones like Cersei and Terrax and Vox. They've done really well this meta, but we're on to the next one. So this is going to be a very interesting meta because this is a node that we've never seen before in game. This is the first time we're going to see it, and so it's kind of hard to make a prediction video because of that. We don't know like how potent these buffs or debuffs are going to be, and so we can still get a rough idea of what it's going to be like. So the first node here is Rich Get Richer. So whichever champion has more unique buffs gains 9% of a bar of power every second. So we've seen metas with this node before, and so we're seeing it again here. But yeah, this one here, Archaeos. So at the start of the fight and at the end of each champion's special attacks, one of the following indefinite effects, so they'll last forever, is randomly applied to each champion. Fatigue, Armor Break, Weakness, Disorient, Bleed, Shock, Tranquilize, Crush, Precision, Armor Up, Fury, Prowess, Regeneration, Cruelty, Resistance Up, Unblockable. So that is a whole labyrinth, Pandora's box of buffs and debuffs that could apply to you or your opponent. So there's also special 1 bias and special 2 bias, which means it's going to be you won't have to bait specials for a super long time, which is good. In my opinion, a lot of metas should have more nodes like this where the defenders throw their specials more often. But yeah, let's get into the preview. So let's talk about the attackers first. Actually, before I talk about the attackers, I want to go over a few fun facts about this meta, about some champions that have abilities that will help them in this meta. Some abilities that you might not be super aware of. So I'm going to talk about 3 champions today. It's sort of an introduction into the video, and then we'll go into the attackers. So the first champion I'll talk about, we'll go alphabetical order. Let's go alphabetical order. The first champion I'll talk about is Luke Cage. So a lot of people do know this, but also a lot of people don't know this, is that Luke Cage, he actually gets extra attack per unique debuff on the opponent. So, and it's actually a lot of attack. Let's just filter, like, let's say 7-star rank 2. That's probably the most common rank that people will have, like Luke Cage, or maybe even a rank 1. But a rank 2, he gets 1,400 attack rating for each unique debuff on the opponent. And so there's definitely options to get multiple unique debuffs, not only from his own abilities but also from Archaeos. So having that as a really easy way to access extra damage is going to be really nice for Luke. The second champion I'll talk about is Mr. Fantastic. So this is sort of 2-part ability. So 5% chance for Mr. Fantastic to evade for each non-damaging debuff on either champion. So that's not just him or the opponent; it's both. So you could start the fight with a debuff on Mr. Fantastic and on his opponent right off the bat. That's a 10% chance to evade. And could be really problematic to fight if you have a bunch of indefinite debuffs on you, and that's not unique ones, that's just each one. And then also his attack rating is increased by about 300 for each debuff for the opponent. So that's not amazing attack, but definitely compared to Luke, but it's definitely a bonus. All right, the last one I'll talk about is Silver Surfer. So Silver Surfer, where is he? So many champions in the game now. Silver Surfer. So let's go 7-star rank 2 again. So he gets, each hit deals a burst of about 500 energy damage, closer to 600 for each unique buff. This scales the base attack only. So he can get, and also his debuffs, the shock debuffs that you can get from the Archaeos node, that also counts as a unique buff for him. So you can get shock debuffs, but also any of the buffs from Archaeos, and also his own buffs, the power gain, the fury, and the armor up. They can all give him extra burst damage on all of his hits. So could be a really nice option as an attacker there, Silver Surfer. So let's go into the attackers now. Okay, so the first category I'll talk about here for attackers are champions that will have easy access to at least 2 unique buffs at the start of the fight, because we're focusing on the Rich Get Richer node here, because having the ability to get 9% of a bar of power basically for the whole fight is going to be really powerful for a lot of champions, especially ones that do a lot of special damage. And having access to basically 2 unique buffs from the start of the fight pretty much guarantees that you will have Rich Get Richer, because you could start the fight with a debuff and your opponent could start with a buff, you know, and that's the worst case scenario. And in that situation, the opponent's going to start off getting Rich Get Richer right away. But if you have a champion that can easily access 2 buffs right from the start of the fight, that just gives the power back to you. So I'm talking about champions like Adam Warlock. Adam Warlock, as soon as he does that second light attack into block, he will, where is it? It's the Sovereignty, isn't it? When he goes his second light into block, he gets his 10 hits, and that's going to get unblockable and true damage. So right off the bat, you have 2 buffs. Angela can get 2, well, not sort of unique buffs, but she does have for armor up buff, and then when she gets to that first bar of power, she gets fury buff, so that's a quick way to get 2 buffs. Cosmic Ghost Rider, of course, he's just a really good attacker in general. He can get, you know, his different judgments, they can give him buffs where it's like cruelty, precision, power gain, aptitude, but also the real reason why Cosmic Ghost Rider is going to be really nice is that he can, if he's awakened, he can get that Damnation debuff, which will Fate Seal the opponent, you know, removing all their buffs, which is just an ability that Cosmic should not have, but that's what Cosmic Ghost Rider has, and that's why that's one of the reasons why he's such a powerful champion in this game. And so, yeah, having the ability to Fate Seal the opponent and remove all your buffs, remove all their buffs, is just going to be a really nice weapon to have for Cosmic Ghost Rider. Obviously, Gallon can get really easy access to those resistance buffs, you know, his physical resistance and energy resistance buffs, and he benefits a lot from Rich Get Richer. He won't be able to get more than, you know, 1 bar of power when his harvest is up, but having Rich Get Richer can definitely help him with that special 2 rotation, you know, stacking those incinerates and getting the intensify buffs can be really nice for Gallon. So definitely going to be a good attacker this meta for sure. Gamora, of course, can get easy access to furies from her light attacks and cruelties from her mediums, you know, very high chance to get those buffs there. So again, really easy access to Rich Get Richer there, and, you know, with her special set super hard, of course. Gladiator can definitely get buffs quick. You know, his confidence buffs he can get very easily. I'm not sure about any. I'm not a huge savant when it comes to Gladiator, but you know, he can get the unstoppable buffs from the special 1 or the vigilance from the special 2. So yeah, it's not the best in terms of unique buffs, but Gladiator definitely could work. For sure. In fact, when he's awakened, he doesn't start with the vigilance. So when he has the vigilance and then the confidence, that can definitely give him Rich Get Richer. Gore, of course, starts with the shadow magic buffs. Hercules doesn't really start with buffs. He can get, you know, those precisions and the cruelties, but that takes a bit of time to get. Hulkling, of course, when we talk about unique buffs, one of the first champions you think of is Hulkling. You know, you can get those bulwarks and the pierces and the aptitudes, really easy access to the unique buffs there. Maestro sort of is on the slow side when it comes to attack. He can work, you know, especially against techs. He gets extra attack rating, but it does take him a while to get those buffs going. But definitely could be all right, better than normal probably. And then another one is Odin, of course, another champion. When you think of unique buffs, Odin comes to mind straight away. Because he starts the fight with aptitude. Sorry. He starts with Fury Armor and Precision, I think, or Aptitude or something. He starts with 3 buffs basically, and also he can actually get corresponding buffs when he knocks the opponent down if he's awakened. You know, he can get, because the Fury Armor, Physical Resistance, I think the first 3 buffs are all buffs that will be part of Archaeos, so he can definitely copy those buffs for sure and make him even stronger. So definitely one to think of there is Odin. Could be really nice. And then Silver Surfer, I already talked about him. He can get, you know, unique buffs from his Power Cosmic, and also benefits from Rich Get Richer usually because he's got Power Cosmic, and then he can, you know, get those different buffs, and then he can get the extra burst damage per unique buff that he has. Really nice. Serpent can get different buffs. You know, he can get his True Focus. Yeah, True Focus, and also the Fury buffs. So definitely going to be more of a defender because of this, but you know, could be used on attack maybe if you want to try him out. And then Venom, of course, starts the fight with a whole multitude of unique buffs, or sometimes it's the same buff, but you know, you can start with 2 of these, and then also a third one. If he's awakened, can get a chance to start with a third one. So it could be really nice there, Venom, and would usually benefit from Rich Get Richer, which is nice for him. But yeah, so that's, and then also, yeah, Vox. So Vox can get really easy access to different buffs with his corrupted buffs. Obviously, you don't want to use him when he's when it's nullified, and he can actually get matching corrupted buffs if buffs expire off the opponent, but because these buffs from Archaeos are indefinite, he won't be able to benefit with this ability. But still, we'll have a lot of access to Rich Get Richer for sure. Very easy access because you can get, you know, very unique buffs. You know, those corrupted fury, corrupted cruelty, corrupted armor up, corrupted, well, not the armor up. You don't want to get hit, but the corrupted precision when you dex, and that and also the different corrupted buffs from your special attacks like undermine, vigilance, and stuff like that. So very easy access to different buffs there with Vox. But yeah, that's going to sort of cover the attackers in terms of unique buffs. Having champions that have really easy access to unique buffs will just give you the leg up that you want at the start of the fight for sure, and will sort of eliminate the chaos somewhat. Alright, so sticking with the buff theme, not only do you want to have buffs, but you also want to be able to control the opponent's buffs sometimes and limit the amount of buffs they have. Because while you can get richer with some champions, you might face a situation where no matter what you do, your opponent's going to have Rich Get Richer. And so being able to control their buffs is really good utility to have. So champions that can really access that easily. Dr. Doom can easily access this. As soon as he gets his aura up, can very easily, well, he nullifies the buffs straight away if you throw a special one, but it can nullify even more after that. Dr. Voodoo is an interesting one. He can, you know, turn all of these opponents' buffs into poison. So if your opponent is not poison immune, could be a really nice option there. Of course, Kushala and Mordo, they sort of go hand in hand because they are 2 champions that utilize Soul Barb. So it's a bit risky because it depends on how many buffs the opponent has. So you're basically letting them have Rich Get Richer, but you're using that against them by punishing all the buffs they have with a big Soul Barb. So definitely one there. Longshot, of course, with his Sig ability, 18 to 60% chance to nullify any buff and replace it with a bad karma. So that's just instantly. That's a passive ability. So that's a really nice passive ability to have. There's no, or he can actually nullify an unblockable buff. So the Archaeos has the chance to provide unblockable buffs. So being able to nullify that straight away is really nice for Longshot. Could be really handy and potentially clutch in some situations. And then others like neutralizers like Rintra and Wiccan, Tigra, that'd be really nice just to limit the amount of buffs the opponent gets. Obviously, they can't limit the buff they get at the start of the fight because it's a neutralized, but can definitely work for sure. Another one that's interesting is Sigil Witch. So Sigil Witch, when she parries, she just nullifies buffs straight away. Where is that ability? Before the opponent lands attack? Yeah. But when blocking, 15% chance to nullify one buff, increased to 100% chance during the world time block window. And if she nullifies any armor up, fury, cruelty, prowess, or unblockable, and by the way, Archaeos provides all of these buffs, maybe not cruelty, but definitely all the other ones, she gains a matching Chaos Surge buff. So she can get heaps of buffs from this if she's able to nullify buffs that the opponent has from Archaeos. So really interesting and fun option, because I know a lot of people, including myself, do have a 7-star Sigil Scarlet Witch now, so it could be a really fun option to test there. And then also Sim Supreme can just nullify buffs straight at the start of the fight, which is a really nice ability to have. Hood is really cool. I'm really starting to like Hood. He can, you know, get that Fate Seal from his special 2, and also the stagger from his crits on his mediums. Sorry, not just his mediums, just his basic attacks. And it just fast tracks his ramp up to a massive heavy detonation there. So really good option to have there, Hood. And so yeah, just having Mystics, you know, especially Mystics. I already talked about Cosmic Ghost Rider. He has that Fate Seal, of course, when he gets his Damnation up, his Power Lock for when he gets 5 Judgments. Really, it's just a really good ability to have, just to basically cancel out Rich Get Richer and make sure the opponent does not get any extra passive power gain from that node. Okay, so next I want to talk about power control. So being able to control passive power control is going to be also a handy ability to have. So the first champion I'll talk about here with that is in mind is Chavez. So Chavez, doesn't really get buffs herself. The only buffs she's going to get in this meta is from Archaeos, but she's able to reverse the opponent's ability power rate. When she has 2 stacks of her negative zone, she reduces the opponent's ability power rate by 120% with 2 of them, 180% with 3 of them. So she can essentially reverse get richer with that, and make sure the opponent never gets to a special 3. Really nice. But obviously with that, on top of that, she has a dimensional energy infusion for each parallel dimension and each buff on the opponent. Because you're banking on them getting buffs, she gets extra attack and extra energy resistance. So Travis is an amazing Battlegrounds attacker in general, but with all of this on top, she's going to be really nice champion to have access to. And then next one I want to talk about is someone I've just well, he's my favorite champion in the game. It's Dr. Octopus. I know a lot of people don't have this guy ranked up and don't even want to think about ranking this guy up, but I want to talk about him because he's my favorite champion. So I'm being a bit biased here, but Dr. Octopus is an incredible champion because if you can basically get your power lock to apply by your physics research, you can basically stop them from ever getting a bar of power. And not only that, you can steal their power. The physics, power drain 100% of any power gained and steal up to 15% of the power drained. So any power gained, that's including rich get richer. So if Dr. Octopus, so he can get, so by the way, he can get armor up buffs from his ability, from his biology research. So that's one buff, but that's the only buff he can get apart from Archaeos. So if you assume that your opponent's going to get more buffs, they're going to be constantly trying to get power, and Dr. Octopus is just going to steal 15% of the power they try to get, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's going to make sure that he can get not only the power lock to stay on there, but because he's able to cycle more special attacks, but he's also going to be able to stack more breakthroughs and do a massive heavy detonation when he has a bunch of breakthroughs applied. So definitely not a meta option, but he's going to be a good option for me, especially. So Dr. Octopus falls in that category of power control. And then, obviously, when we talk about passive power control, things that come to mind is like Petrify and Wither. So, champions like, well, Cap won't work because he needs a teammate. But, who do I have on my list? Photon. So Photon can apply, passive Petrify when the opponent is inflicted with a debuff, and she can obviously remove willpower. So that's a really nice ability to have because the opponent, you assume the opponents will have willpower, and so if they get debuffs on them, they're going to constantly try to heal from them. But just by turning that off, you don't have to worry about them healing at all, unless they get a regeneration buff. So that's a really nice ability to have. Photon. Obviously, some other champions have that, like Dust. And maybe some others, but yeah, that's Photon's the main one. She was the first one, I think. But also she can inflict her suppressions as well from her basic attacks, 10%, which isn't a lot, but it all counts. And not only that, is she is able to actually stack up her charges quicker than normal because she gets one charge whenever the opponent is inflicted with a debuff. So that's going to include the debuffs from Archaeos. So definitely a decent attacker there. Obviously, Quicksilver can get withers from when he dexes attacks, and it's a pretty nice wither as well. It's a 35% potency wither, and he can get 3 of them. So he can basically shut off any ability power rate, including Rich Get Richer, when he has 3 withers, and he can. It's not easy to keep it up forever, but it's a nice thing to have access to for sure. Obviously, Scorpion can get a nice Petrify on a special 2. I already talked about Mr. Fantastic, so he can. I already talked about his evadability and also the extra attack he gets, but he is one of the best Petrifies in the game, I think, because he can start with a Petrify. He's the only champion in the game that can start the fight with a Petrify, and it's a 40% Petrify. He can stack that up to 3 times, and not only is that going to help with the passive power gain from Rich Get Richer, but also, like Photon, he's basically going to be able to turn off willpower and actually reverse the healing from willpower, because he can get 120% potency. Petrify plus Despair is, extra regen reduction there, plus all these debuffs, plus the debuffs from Archaeos. Going to be not the quickest attacker, but he's going to be really nice. Definitely quicker than people think, I think. And then I think the last one I'll talk about here is Spider-Man 2099. So of course, just like Quicksilver, he can get withers when he dashes, when he dodges an attack. He gets. So I'm not a massive savant on Spider-Man in 2099 either, but it's something about withers, right? He gets it's from his special attack, I think, his special 2. Yeah, so 125% wither debuff for 15 seconds. He can stack that a bunch of times, and he can pause that as well. Each hit also deals a burst of physical damage per unique debuff on the opponent. That doesn't mean just his debuffs, that means any debuffs. So that means Archaeos debuffs as well. So definitely a nice attacker to have there, a safe attacker, and also is buff immune. So it's somewhat limiting because he won't be able to get buffs from Archaeos, but will be really nice with that Wither for sure. But yeah, that sort of covers the power control category of the video. And then finally for attackers, I will talk about champions that can have easy access to cleanse or purify, a way to shrug debuffs, because Archaeos is going to be inflicting some debuffs that you're not going to like, whether it's damage over time debuffs like bleed or shock, or some debuffs like crush, which won't let you be able to block, and then other ones like fatigue that will reduce your crit rating, weakness that will reduce your attack. So having ways to remove those debuffs or just prevent those debuffs completely would be really nice. So Baron Zemo comes to mind straight away, because not only does he have those indefinite cleanses, that also, if he consumes all of those, that puts the root on the opponent, and that's just going to make his ramp quicker than normal. Because he's going to put the root on, and he's going to start inflicting indefinite bleed debuffs. But if he doesn't, if they're bleed immune, he gets those massive furies, of course. Whenever the opponent purifies a debuff or is immune to an effect, he gets a fury buff, increasing the attack rating of his next hit by 8,000. So not definitely, again, like Mr. Fantastic, not going to be the quickest, but will be a really nice dual threat, I think, for sure, Baron Zemo. Another one is Bullseye. So Bullseye is an incredible defender, but will be a nice attack. He can be an okay attacker, because if he's sigged up, he can purify 50% of all debuffs. It's only 50%, so you won't be able to purify all of his debuffs, but it will be a nice way to sort of limit the damage somewhat. But again, it's a little bit up to chance there. Crossbones at max sig has a 90% chance of purify incoming debuffs just straight away, and that helps him because he gets fury buffs. And he won't be able to really trigger it consecutively, because at the start of the fight and after each special, so he'll be able to purify pretty much all debuffs at max sig. Really nice ability to have. And there's other ones, like Hitmonkey. He can purify debuffs when he reaches his is it Assassins or his Primal? Primal, I think. Yeah, Primal. Get a 100% chance to purify. It's only the damage over time debuffs, so it's only the bleeds and the shocks. So it's not, you won't be able to purify the non-damaging ones, but it will be, because we don't know how potent the bleeds and shocks will be, but it could be an alright option to have. Obviously, Killmonger, he can get power whenever he gets a debuff, so it'll be alright. Obviously, better defender in that way. Kingpin, of course, whenever he shrugs a debuff, he turns it into rage, and that feeds his ramp, makes him get overpowered quicker. And if he has, a few of those debuffs from Archaeos and then gets another debuff, as soon as he gets to 8, he's just going to turn them all off anyway and get overpower, and that's guaranteed. So either way, you're going to be able to get a guaranteed way to shrug debuffs eventually, even though it doesn't have a 100% chance to shrug each individual debuff. Mantis, of course, has a Tranquilize, which is even more potent against Science Champions. So I'm not a massive Mantis player, but I know some people will definitely enjoy using Mantis this meta. And then another one is Mole Man. Of course, just like Kingpin, Mole Man is able to benefit from shrugging debuffs, because he can just turn it into Monster Mass. And once he gets to a certain amount of monster mass, he can just go into frenzy whenever he wants and just start nuking the opponent. So having a way to fast track that ramp while also not having to worry about any debuffs is really nice. Nick Fury can purify all non-damaging debuffs when he throws a heavy attack. Whenever he knocks down the opponent, purifies non-damaging debuffs. Won't be able to heal from purify the bleeds or the shocks, but still the non-damaging debuffs will be the more common ones. Ronan, of course, can purify debuffs when he enters his guard stance. When entering the stance, there's a 100% chance to purify debuffs, so really nice way to just shrug off any debuffs that he gets from Archaeos. And he can do that pretty frequently as well. And finally, I'll just mention some champs you might want to avoid this meta. Not completely, it'll be alright to have them in your deck, but they won't be as powerful as most other champions. And so there's two sort of categories I'll talk about. The first category is buff immunity. So I already talked about Spider-Man 2099. He has a very, very strong Wither on his special 2, but he's also buff immune, so he won't be able to get access to those Archaeos buffs, which could be really nice. And there's other buff immune champions like Ant-Man, Red Guardian, Titania. I think that's most of them. Cassie Lang. I think that's all of them. The main ones that I can think of. The buff immune champs that won't be able to benefit from the Archaeos buffs, and they will only be hurt by debuffs. And obviously, they will never benefit from Rich Get Richer. And then the second category I'll talk about of champs you don't want to use is Juggernaut. You just don't want to use Juggernaut this meta. This is an anti-Juggernaut meta, and that's because Archaeos will inflict random debuffs. A lot of those debuffs are non-damaging, so there's a very, very strong chance that you could start the fight with a non-damaging debuff, and that means you won't have your gem. And the gem is what makes Juggernaut so strong. It gives him basically 50% attack, damage reduction, immunity to reverse controls, but also gives him the ability to get the unstoppable bust, which gives him so much more attack and power rate. So this is going to be just an anti-Jugs meta. Juggernaut will not work for this meta whatsoever, unless you have the best luck in the world and never get non-damaging debuffs and you only trigger buffs. So Juggernaut, don't even think about running him in your deck. He's just not going to be good for this, unfortunately. But that's going to cover the attacker section. Now let's go over to the defenders. Alright, so now we've reached the defender section of the video. Now, this combination of nodes, it sort of just helps defenders a lot in general. So, especially if they're benefiting from Rich Get Richer and they get a really favorable set of buffs for them, it can definitely make your life very tricky. You know, if the defender starts the fight with an indefinite unblockable buff, you're just going to have a hard time in general. Or if you start the fight with an indefinite crush debuff, that's not going to be a good time. So the defender, sort of the good defenders in this meta, it's sort of up in the air because a lot of defenders will just be up to chance. The good defenders, depending on what happens in an individual fight. But I will go over some champions that will be better than a lot of others. So champions that have buffs and power gain, right? There's two that come to mind for me. There's Hyperion. He can get passive power gain from his power gain buffs, and that's the only buff he can get as a defender unless he hits you with a heavy attack. But could benefit from Rich Get Richer if you start unlucky, and could definitely be bad if you don't have a good power controller. But obviously, when the elephant in the room is Serpent. So Serpent is just a nightmare defender, the best defender in the game, in my opinion. Without a good counter, it's just not a good time. And with this Netta on top of it, you know, if you're starting the fight and Serpent starts an indefinite unblockable buff, you're just screwed with no matter what. There's just no way around it. You just die. You're just gonna die, no matter who you use, unless maybe Scarlet Witch Sigil can remove the unblockable buff. That's the only safest counter I can possibly think of. But anyone else, it's just not gonna be a good time. So, because not only that, he's gonna get a lot of power gain naturally, but if he's benefiting from Rich Get Richer as well, this is even more. And if he's throwing special 2s more, that's more power gain buffs. It's gonna be a nightmare matchup. This meta, even more than normal. So, yeah, he's definitely be on my ban list, I think. Not that he wasn't already. But yeah, the champions that can get passive power gain. The other ones, of course, there's Mystics, but they're not as strong because, you know, they don't have those like Mangog, and there's other ones like Kindred can. Kindred is like Power Steel. But there's other ones that I can't really think of, or Doctor Strange sort of. Yeah, there's really the Serpent's the main one I'm talking about here. Is that passive power gain and also Rich Get Richer being a really, really deadly combination potentially. And then the next credit I'll talk about, I already talked about in the attacker section, but it's Purify and Cleanse, because not only do you want to have this ability for your attackers sometimes, but you also want to have it for your defenders, because, you know, the debuffs will apply on the defenders as well. So if you can just remove those and make your defenders stronger that way, it could be really nice. So, you know, Atuma doesn't purify the debuffs unless he's stunned, and it only purifies the stun debuff. where does it say? Yeah, when inflicted with a stun and infuriate, he can purify one non-damaging debuff. But what I want to talk about with the tumor is that he can actually, when he's awakened, his well, the bleed debuffs suffer reduced potency, so he's just going to heal from that with willpower. But his thorns damage actually increases for each bleed effect on either champion. So if you get multiple bleeds during the fight, that can be really, really dangerous when you're fighting a tumor for sure. Obviously, I talked about Zemo already. Could be a really nice dual threat because he just gets 5 cleanses at the start of the fight, and those are going to trigger on any debuff unless it's a parry stun. So, and you know, it could be a potentially unavoidable route if you're fighting him. If you just end up giving him 5 debuffs from Archaeos, so you want to be able to nuke this guy down before that happens for sure, unless you want to get rooted. And then another one is, well, I already talked about Bullseye because, you know, when he's awakened and you hit him with a heavy attack, he can purify debuffs. That's not only if he throws heavy attacks, it's also if his opponent throws heavy attacks. Crossbones already talked about, you know, that purified of debuffs that just fuels his fire, gives him more fury buffs. Killmonger, of course, gets extra powers. That's just more power that can trigger reverb. You know, if you the higher his power is, the more reverb damage he's going to have. Right, where does it say? Damage is based on Killmonger's stored power. So if he starts the fight with a debuff and you hit him, that's just guaranteed damage right away. Normally he won't start with any power, so when you hit him, the reverb damage is 0. So that's not going to be the case this meta if he starts with a debuff. Obviously, Kingpin can just shrug heaps of debuffs, get heaps of overpowers. Korg can shrug the debuffs when he's in his rock shield, and obviously you want to max sig Korg because that keeps that rock shield up longer. The more debuffs that you try to apply to him from Archaeos. And then obviously Mole Man, like I talked about in the attacker section, the debuffs that he purifies, they just fuel his fire, make him stronger. And then that's sort of it as far as tough defenders go for skills. There's not too many of them, but there's definitely one to keep an eye on. Zemo is definitely the most dangerous one, I think, for sure, in this section. Now, the next category I'll talk about is kind of a weird one because it's sort of like an RNG based defender. So there's some champions that you really want to avoid giving them certain debuffs. For example, Elsa Bloodstone. Unless you're using a mutant, if she has a bleed on her, she is going to inflict a passive generation, dealing damage over every 0.5 seconds until all bleed debuffs on Elsa end. But on this node, they're not going to end. And while this degen is active, opponents will also be passively heal blocked. So that's just a death match right there if you face an Elsa Bloodstone and she gets a bleed. Unless you have a mutant. So there's a low chance for that to happen, but it can happen. If we go over some mutants, if Bishop gets bleeds or shocks, he can... each time he consumes a prowess, he also deals energy damage to the opponent. Only scales as his base attack, but that's just energy damage that you can't avoid if he gets a bleed or shock and starts purifying prowesses. Speaking of prowesses, champions with prowess, Havoc. If Havoc has a shock on him, where is this? First off, he has energy resistance, so he's not going to take much damage from the shock. But also, each time Havoc receives energy damage, he gains a plasma charge, and that includes shock. So he's just going to get plasma charges that go through the roof. So unless you have a champion with an armor up buff, he's going to deal some big boy damage through plasma detonation. Again, it's a low chance for that to happen, but it can happen. Especially if it's a permanent shock, there's no way around it. But he can also, with bleeds, he can also, where does it say? Plasma debuff. If made to bleed, Havoc puts a plasma build up on the opponent. So that's just another debuff that he can use to fuel up to a big detonation. So that's only one plasma build up. It's not a permanent thing like the shock, but it's still an extra thing to worry about. Of course, Mr. Sinister can just turn the debuffs into you if he throws a special one. You don't want that to happen. And then last champion I'll talk about is Dragon Man. So Dragon Man, it's only a small chance to happen, but if he gets armor broken from the node, he will just deal degen damage to you every 0.5 seconds. Unlike Elsa, he won't heal block you, but that's still a lot of degen damage. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot, and it's not gonna be pretty. So yeah, that's just a couple of defenders. They're defenders. Some of them are decent defenders, but yeah, they can definitely go. A fight can go very, very wrong if you get bad luck. So that's a sort of like an RNG based defender section I've talked about there. And then the last section I'll talk about is sort of like champions that you don't want to throw special 1. The champions that you want to push to special 2 because of the special 1 bias. Obviously, the special 1 bias and special 2 bias. We don't know how strong that's going to be, but there's definitely a chance that defenders might start throwing specials through block if the chance is high enough. So champions like Absorbing Man, if you want to be able to alternate baiting specials, you don't want him to throw special 1 after special 1 because he's going to regen so much on top of the willpower healing from the debuffs. As other champions like Arcade, his special 1 is very long, very annoying, and it applies his Poison Cloud, which is just bad news. I already talked about him, but Bishop, if he starts throwing those special 1s, that's a lot of incinerate damage, potential incinerate damage, unless you got an incinerate immune champ. Dr. Doom, he throws a special 1, that's just an aura straight away that you don't want to have to deal with. I already talked about him, but Havoc is definitely one champion you never want him to throw a special 1, of course, because that's just going to get him into that plasma overcharge and get plasma every second for the next 9 seconds. Hulkling is another one. If you start spamming the special 1s, he's going to go indestructible a lot of the fight. And obviously with Rich Get Richer as well, there's a definite chance he could just spam special 1s forever, unless you got really good power control. So definitely a potentially scary one there is Hulkling. Obviously Kindred is a champion that you'd rather push to special 2. A lot of people are getting better at punishing a special 1, of course, but he's definitely a potentially scary one if you're not good at punishing a special 1. Nick Fury, of course, not only is it a very long special and there's a lot of block damage, but it also gives him tactical charges, so that's just someone you don't want to have to bait special 1 against. Mr. Fantastic already talked about, that just his special 1 just places more debuffs, daggers and taunts, and that right there, there's an extra 10% chance for him to evade. I already talked about that, so he's going to be a potentially scary defender, Mr. Fantastic, if you don't have a good evade counter. And also the Destroyer. So the Destroyer is obviously a newer champion, but so his special 1, it gives him 10 charges on a hit, block, or whiff. So no matter what, I think it's 3 hits in his special 1. Yeah, so no matter what, he's going to get 30 destruction charges. And when he gets 100, he's going to get 4 bars of power. So you definitely want to be careful if you're baiting a special 1. Or you definitely want to be pushed into special 2 if you don't have a way around that 4 bars of power. Yeah, be careful about that for sure. And then the last bit I want to talk about for defenders, he deserves his own category because he's going to be that much of a pain in the ass to fight, and his name is Void. So Void, if you are not aware, when the opponent is suffering from a debuff, not just a non-damaging debuff, not just a damaging debuff, any type of debuff, for each unique debuff type, the opponent takes a lot of direct damage. Let's say 7-star rank 2. The opponent takes 454 direct damage per second. That's a lot. Yes, that is a lot. And there's no way around that. You just take damage. It's direct damage. It's not physical damage, it's not energy damage, just direct damage. You just lose health. And so if you don't have a way to either cleanse the debuffs or tranquilize the debuffs or purify the debuffs, you're going to have a very hard time against this guy if you start getting damaging or any debuffs from you from Archaeos. And that's going to make him also a really nice dual threat. Could be a really nice attacker for sure, because not only is he's going to get that damage from the unique debuffs, but also he's going to be able to stack his petrifies and different debuffs, so his agility and fatigues. So it could be a really nice attacker as well. So I haven't mentioned him until now because I think he's going to be just the MVP of this meta is Void. He's going to be the MVP. I think I don't have a Void. My Void's like 6-star rank 3, so he's going to be on my ban list because of this. He's going to be such a powerful champion on both sides of the battle field. So definitely you want to have a game plan in mind if you see a Void in your opponent's Void in your opponent's draft. So yeah, that's going to cover it for the Defenders. Hope you guys enjoyed this part of the video. Now we'll go over to the Masteries. Alright, so surprise, surprise, this Mastery setup is the exact same as I had in my last video for weeks 1 to 2. And so there's really not too much to talk about, but I do want to point out what certain masteries are going to be able to do in this meta and why they're so important. So the first one I'll talk about is Despair. So when the opponents have debuffs applied to them, debuffs applied to enemies reduce their healing and regeneration by up to 15% each. And so with 7 debuffs, that's 100% healing reduction. So if your opponent is running willpower, which you should have willpower on, by the way, so you can heal when you have debuffs. But if you have 3 out of 3 Despair, each debuff the opponent has is going to cut down their healing and make the fight go quicker, because they're not going to be able to heal as much. So very important mastery to have in general, but it's going to be really important this meta, because your opponents will be trying to heal a lot from those debuffs, but also if they get regeneration buffs, they'll try to heal from that as well. So very important one to have. I want to talk about deep wounds because bleed debuffs will be part of this meta. Now this first part of the ability of the mastery is going to be useless because the bleed debuffs your champions inflict last 2.5 seconds longer. It'll be useless for Archaeos. It will still be useful for champions like Warlock and Nick and Archangel and others. But the one to point out for me is if they currently have more health than the opponent, and that's usually going to be your defender has more health than the attacker, bleed debuffs inflict an instantly, dealing 1% of the opponent's max health as direct damage. So if you're fighting and you start, and if you bait a special attack and then you get a bleed debuff on yourself, you're just going to take damage straight away because of deep wounds. So that's going to be a nice way to chip your opponent's attacker down. Obviously they're going to be healed some of it back from willpower potentially, but make sure you have Despair so you can cut down that healing. Another one I want to point out is recovery. So Despair can reduce the healing to 0 essentially if you have 7 debuffs. But recovery can actually applies after Despair. So recovery, if you have Despair reduce the healing down to 0, recovery actually boosts that up to 15% again. So if you have recovery, no matter what, you're just going to be able to heal throughout the fight. If you have debuffs on you and you have willpower, right? So you want to make sure you definitely have 3 out of 3 points in recovery. That's just a staple, but it's going to be super important this meta. Obviously, I already talked about willpower. For each new type of debuff, so that's a unique debuff, you'll passively regenerate health per second and also actually get armor, which a lot of people don't know about. Obviously, the robots won't be able to benefit from it. I only recommend 1 point because it's your diminishing returns after that 1 point, but it's a really, really important mastery to have. And then the last one I'll talk about is Inequity. So Inequity, you passively reduce enemy attack by 6% for each debuff they're currently suffering from. So that's going to be really important for your defenders. So especially because it's going to be beneficial for pretty much every defender, because as soon as your opponent's attacker gets debuff on them, that straight away they have their attack reduced by 6%. And if it's a weakness as well or fatigue that reduces their attack or their crit rating, it's going to be even harder for them to get the opponent down in a quick amount of time. So very important mastery to have for this meta is Inequity. So this is the proficiencies, same as normal. So that's the one I wanted to talk about. I want to talk about why these masteries are going to be really good. If you don't have them yet, definitely try to unlock these, because these are going to be really important in this meta and could be definitely match deciding in some situations. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned some new stuff. Hope you guys are getting to sort of think what this meta might have in store. Obviously, it's very hard to predict because we've never seen this meta before, and it's also a very chaotic meta on paper. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be really fun, I think. But yeah, that's going to do it for me today, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.